Today's webinar is part of a series of regular webinars conducted by Native Connections, which is a part of the Tribal Training and Technical Assistance Center. Here is the contact information listed for your coordinators. You should know who your coordinator is at this stage in the process. And again, these are your the contact details for each of those coordinators. Again, my name is Josephine Keefe, Native Connections Coordinator and the moderator for today's webinar. Our facilitators today are Deborah Rattler, Native Connections Coordinator and Director, and Iceland Rio, Native Connections Evaluations Coordinator. And here to introduce themselves in more detail, I present Deborah Rattler and Iceland Rio.
Good morning. This is Deborah Rattler. I'm from North Central Montana, and I am one of the Native Connections coordinators, and I'm also the director for Native Connections. Thank you.
Good morning and good afternoon to each of you. My name is Iceland Rio, and I'm Blackfeet from Montana as well, and I serve as the evaluation coordinator for Native Connections. Thank you.
The Native Connections CRA webinar series will continue on for February 3rd. That will be part 6 of the final series on February 3rd at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. After that, we will be venturing into postvention for February 10th. This is part 1 of a two-part series. Postvention part 2 will take place on February 17th. This is a typo on our slide here, and we apologize for that. But again, it is postvention part 2 will take place on February 17th.
Okay, thank you. Today we're going to get started with demonstrating the scoring process, and this is part 5 in our Community Readiness Assessment series.
Here is a quote from Albert Einstein, known as one of the most prolific scientists of our time and famous for the theory of relativity. Everything that can be counted does not necessarily count. Everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. Einstein was also a bit of a philosopher in life, and this to make sense of this quote, let's take it one part at a time. Everything that can be counted does not necessarily count. Einstein here is saying that things that cannot necessarily be seen, things that can be seen in this first section, everything that counts that can be counted does not necessarily count. Things that we hold as possessions or material items, how many cars an individual owns, does not necessarily count in life. But as we take the second part, everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. The things that we hold closest to ourselves, the things that we hold dearest, love and happiness, the success of our communities, can't necessarily be counted numerically. And this is Albert Einstein's view and philosophy on the importance of life and what we hold true.
Well, today, as we go through the Community Readiness Assessment scoring process, well, I guess one of the things I wanted to say is that the scoring process is where all of your work for during the past 5 webinars, learning about the model, understanding it. Last week we went through all the steps of how to do an interview. Now that you're up to the scoring process, this is where everything is going to start making a lot of sense to you about your community, the dimensions, the strategies, everything that we've reviewed so far. When I was learning the CRA process, scoring was the most challenging part for me. And at first, I just went through it really fast, and I scored everything. which is not what you're supposed to do. We're going to get into the process a little further, and when I say I'm scoring every question, you don't score every question. And I had to reach out to my coworkers and my supervisor at the time, and to have them explain to me just what the scoring process was. There's addition in it, there's division, and it's just really looking through the different instruments to get that final score. So, as we go through this process today, and then in the future as you're doing your scoring, I really want to remind you to, reach out to your coordinators at any time. We are all really well-versed in the whole scoring process. We're here to help you. So don't make, some of the mistakes that I did and just try to figure this out by yourself. We're here to help you. So just give us an email or call us, and we'll be there for you. Last week we went through the steps of the interview, but it's been there. We've gone on a journey so far. We've gone through 4 webinars up until this time. That first webinar, Gathering Your CRA Score, we looked at the theoretical foundation, and we also looked at the purpose of the CRA, and we gave you examples of those and went into a lot of detail about each one of those. Next, we went into identifying your community issues. Through that, on that webinar, we looked at the process of conducting the community readiness assessment, and also, what is the guide? How do you use that? What does it mean? And just how to apply that, to the issues in your community. And then when we got to defining your community, this is where we really started looking at those stages of the readiness model and how they fit in your community. We started looking at the organizations and, the demographics of the communities, all your populations, and so all of this was drawn together. Gary Newman had given us a really good example of his community in the Salish Kootenai tribe in Montana, where he really broke down all of his communities, the organizations that were there, and he really gave us, I think, a really good overview of just what it is to really define your community and to really look at each part of your community that, we're working with. And then last week when we did conducting the interviews, we went through a step-by-step process on that so that, we broke it all apart. We went through several of the questions so that you'd really get a good idea of how to set up your interview, how you choose your people that you're going to interview, the time you're going to set to do your interviews, and how you do your questions, and how you ask them, how you prepare for them. So, so today, as we go into the scoring process, now you're ready to really look at where we've come from, where we're going next. And this is just a really quick slide here to just put the interview process in perspective. 8 interviews. And I really made a point last week to say to review your interview questions before you do your interview, because you want to make sure that you're understanding those questions. And if you have any kind of thoughts or comments about why that question is stated that way, do that before the interview. Don't wait until you're in the interview with your interviewee to, start saying, well, I need to ask my supervisor this, or I'm not sure. Just be prepared for that interview. And, it's 30 to 60 minutes per interview. One of the things I wanted to say, too, is that in all of our communities, we have our native language speakers. And so if you're interviewing somebody whose first language is your language of your tribe, give yourself extra time, to make sure that those questions are translated and that the person you're interviewing, does understand, what you're saying to them. So you might want to practice that if you are going to be translating these questions. And when you get to conducting your interview, you both should be comfortable with each other, at ease, and, as I said last week too, be ready for emotion if that comes up, because suicide is a really touchy subject for some people. It really brings out the emotion in people, especially if they've had something happen to them previously, concerning suicide. So here, as we're getting through the scoring process, again, this is a process from here to there. And so we've lined it up in this way. You're going to prepare to score. You're going to do these scores individually. Then you're going to discuss the scores with your scoring partner. You'll determine a combined score. You'll find your calculated score. And then at the end here, you're going to have your complete overall score, so you know where your community is at and where you're going to begin. When we get to the strategic planning process and we start looking at putting that together, and looking at the different strategies, that's where the score is really going. You're really going to see it fall into place.
This is Iceland, and I'm going to take you through the individual scoring piece and doing the combined scores of this part of the process here. And so just to give you a quick overview of the parts I'll be covering are kind of how to use the tools that are in the manual to conduct your scoring once your interviews are done, and then how you're going to use the anchored rating scales, and then also how you're going to record your information on the scoring sheet and kind of walk you through that process. And then we're also going to have a few examples. We've decided to use the polling question example, where Deborah and I have actually drafted up a few interview responses to have you start practicing how to actually score the interviews. So that's a little bit of what's to come in the next few slides. But first, to start this process, the individual scoring, each of the scorers are going to be doing this individually by themselves. And so the easiest way to do this is to have three items in front of you, and what those are going to be, you're going to have your stack of 8 interviews in front of you, and that's represented by the first column here, just showing you it contains all the dimensions and all the questions, and you'll have 8 of those. The second tool you're going to have is your set of anchored rating scales, and make sure you have all 6 of these because there's a specific rating scale for each dimension. And then the last item you'll need is your scoring sheet, and that's one page in the manual that has the individual table as well as the combined table. And Deborah, I believe, has created with the coordinators an Excel worksheet that is going to help you as an additional tool in calculating your overall scores. So when you begin the scoring process, what you're going to look at is one interview, and you want to read through this completely first just to kind of get an idea of this person's kind of where they're coming from, the way that they talk, the way that their answers are written. So you want to read through it in its entirety to begin with. And the other thing you're going to want to do is to get the anchored rating scales, A through F on this as well, to use in combination with the interview. So what you actually do first, and this is just to show you an example, is you're going to read through the questions on a full dimension. In this example, we use dimension E. And what you're going to do is find the appropriate anchored rating scale, as well in this case is going to be the anchored rating scale for dimension E. And these are going to be your two tools that you're going to use for this particular one to find one dimension score. Now, this important part of the dimension score is that, like Deborah said, you're not going to score each individual question. You're going to assign one score to the entire dimension. So in this case, for questions 23 through 25, you're going to look at the information, the answers that the interviewee gave, and use that against the anchored rating scale to find your individual score. To show you kind of how to do this, I'm going to show you an example of kind of how you start using the scale to kind of assign your score. And just to give you an upfront view, As I said before, there's specific anchored rating scales. These are found on pages 28 through 33 in your CRA manual, and they align with the dimension in the interview question. So you can see here on this slide, Dimension A, existing community efforts, is comprised of questions 1 through 10. And those specifically have questions and the levels in the anchored rating scale. They align with this idea of existing community efforts. Dimension B, community knowledge of efforts, questions 11 through 14. In the interview, also align with the anchored rating scale for Dimension B, which is also community knowledge of efforts. And so as you can see, there is an anchored rating scale for each of the dimensions. C is leadership, questions 15 through 18. Dimension D is community climate, questions 19 through 22. Dimension E is community knowledge about the issue, questions 23 through 25. And Dimension F is resources, questions 26 through 30. So using our example to actually use an anchored rating scale to find a score, you'd have, for this one, we're using anchored rating scale A, which is found on page 28. And you would get your information from questions 1 through 10, and you kind of get an overall feel of what they're trying to say concerning these questions. And so what you do is you look at your anchored rating scale, and there's kind of a smaller example on the left-hand side of the slide here. And this one is for Dimension A, so it's looking at existing community efforts. And so what you do is you look at stage 1, and what this stage is that there's no awareness of the need for efforts to address suicide prevention. And depending on how the interviewee answered this, there might be an indication that there is something going on in the community, whether it be maybe there's brochures or something in a program in the community, or maybe information you could get at an IHS, things like that. So I would think in my mind that's a little bit more than no awareness for any efforts to address this. So I would say, okay, I'm going to exceed this statement and move on to stage 2 in the anchored rating scale. Now, stage 2 is no efforts addressing suicide prevention. And so based on the information from the interviewee for Dimension A, again, those questions 1 through 10, and let's say in this case they said, gave information about maybe there wasn't any direct efforts, but maybe there was some kind of information, I would use that and say, okay, does this still mean no efforts addressing suicide prevention? And to me, I would say, no, that probably means a little bit more. So that would indicate to me I could exceed this statement and move on to stage 3. Stage 3 on the anchored rating scale in this case is a few individuals recognize the need to initiate some type of effort, but there is no immediate motivation to do anything. So this might be kind of an indication where I think, all right, well, there's not really anything directly, no specific effort. A few people do know about maybe information that's out there, or maybe a concern has come up in the community, or maybe somebody has experienced suicide. And so to me, that would indicate there is a few individuals, but there's no immediate addressing the need for suicide prevention in the community. So I would think I would need to stop here on the anchored rating scale and not proceed to any further levels. So to get my exact score for this dimension on this interview, I would know it's going to be somewhere between stage 2 and stage 3. And so stage 2 and stage 3, what you do is on the anchored rating scales, they go up by increments of 1/4 of a point, 0.25. So each of the dashes on the anchored rating scale represents 0.25. So in this case, we could get a dimension score of 2, 2.25, 2.50, 2.75, or a 3. And just to wrap up this instance here, I didn't quite feel maybe that information reached a 2.75, but I know it wasn't quite as low as a 2. So for my judgment in this case, and the anchored rating scale helps you with this, I would assign this a 2.75. And this is what you're going to do. for each of the dimensions in each interview. So now the best way, I think, to learn how to do this is to actually start doing it yourselves. And so here's the example that Deborah and I were able to create. And this one is looking at Dimension B. So if all of you can open up your CRA manuals, if you have them handy there, to Dimension B, it's on page 29. And we're going to use the information on the slide here to have you experience what it's like trying to come up with a score for Dimension B for this interview. And so the questions for Dimension B are looking at community knowledge about prevention. And they ask, based on your knowledge, what does the community know about efforts for suicide prevention and treatment of mental illness? Then it asks you to rate on a scale from 1 to 10, how aware is the general community of these prevention and treatment efforts? What are the strengths of the available prevention programs and treatment services? And what are the limitations of the available prevention programs and treatment services? And so what I'd like you to do is, if you can read through these responses here, and then use this information. We pulled up a pod on the right-hand side that says, how would you score Dimension B? After reading through it and using the anchored rating scale for Dimension B, select the range of the score that you think you would assign this. And I'll give you a few minutes to do that, to read through the information. And then we can see how the data comes in from all of you trying to experience this maybe for the first time, or this is just a refresher for you on how you would score Dimension B. Looks like we have a few responses, and we're making the slide bigger so everybody can see in real time how we're looking at this. Thank you for submitting your response. Again, go ahead and read through the answers on this slide for questions 11 through 14 and use your anchored rating scale for Dimension B to score this dimension, and then select the range in the pod window over here on where you think that score would fall. And it looks like we've had 3 people select the range of 2 to 2.75. We have another one, 3 to 3.75. Just another minute or two on this. Great, somebody said a 5 to 5.75. Just another minute here. Okay, well, it looks like a majority of us on the webinar today have indicated that this falls somewhere between 2 and a 2.75. And I think when Deborah and I went through it, we were kind of having a discussion as well. We each individually scored it, and Deborah was right at a 3, and initially I was kind of at a 2. So these tools really help you kind of ultimately come together later on in the combined scores, but this just kind of gives you some practice how to do this. And so we have another example. If you want to turn to page 30 in your manual, we're going to be using the anchored rating scale for Dimension C. And here are the responses for Dimension C. And this one is looking at the dimension of leadership, questions 15 through 18. And again, if you can read through these answers and use this information with the anchored rating scale for Dimension C, and again, select the range where you feel you would score this dimension on the right-hand side there in the pod. And this is just to kind of help you. This is how you would progress through each interview as you do one dimension. In this case, we did Dimension B. The next one, you would do dimension C, which is leadership. And this kind of shows you the progression of the groups of questions that you would be focusing on for each dimension. So again, read through the responses here for questions 15 through 18. And then on the right-hand side, indicate how you would score this dimension. And I'll give you just a few minutes to do this. And also, as we're working on this, if anything comes to mind or any questions, feel free to indicate that in the chat box. Oh, great. Responses are starting to come in. You can see there a couple have it set indicated it's in the 3 to 3.75 range. One's indicated the 4 to 4.75. I can tell it's getting to be a little bit clearer now. The responses are coming in quicker, and we're kind of narrowing our range of where our answers are falling. Just another minute on this. So for dimension C on leadership in this example, most of you indicated it is in the range of 3 to 3.75, and 3 is the vague awareness stage of readiness in this case. So this is really exciting to see that the range of the answers came much closer together in this one. So this indicates to me that you guys are going to get the hang of this in no time flat. So again, you would just go through each dimension on each interview and score the dimensions individually. Again, this is what this slide is to show you, is that scorer A records their answers in the individual table, and scorer B records them in the individual table, and this is to be done individually. And the tool that Deborah and the coordinators have come up with is this slide right here. It's an example of what looks like on the Excel worksheet. And they've created this table for you to automatically fill your scores in. And so this is what a completed individual table would look like, to where you have scores for every interview in each of the dimensions. So when each of the scorers have completed their individual scoring, then we get to move on to the next phase of finding the CRA score. And this is where the discussion comes in to find the combined scores. And this is where it's talking about in the manual. The goal is to reach a consensus score for each dimension for each interview. And so the way that this happens is a dialogue between the two scores. And it's really important here that, again, you have your interviews with you, you have your set of anchored rating scales, and then your scoring sheets that you worked on individually, and you bring those together. And so what you're going to do in this case is you can start with one interview, and you can look at each dimension in one interview, and you're going to see if you both selected the same score or maybe a different score for this dimension for this interview. And if it happens to be different, this is where you start having the discussion, and you explain to each other why you selected the score that you did for this dimension on this particular interview. And what you're going to try to do is come to a consensus to where, based on your reasoning and maybe looking back at your notes that you took through the interview and maybe just any thoughts that came to mind, this is where this comes into play, to where you really come together to solidify the score for each dimension for each interview, and it's something that you both agree on. So again, here's another example here we're going to provide for you, and we have another polling pod here on the right-hand side to where you can select the scores. And so Deborah and I are actually going to show you an example maybe of what the dialogue could sound like when you're trying to reach a consensus score. And for this one, we're using Dimension E, knowledge about the problem. And that anchored rating scale is on page 32 in the manual. And so here we're looking at this interview, and here's the answers that they gave for questions 23 through 25. And this particular interviewee indicated that they weren't sure, they didn't know that the community's super knowledgeable about the issue of suicide. They also didn't know what types of information are available about suicide prevention, and they indicated here they would Google it. They didn't know if there are any brochures with numbers out there or not in the community. And then the final question on this dimension is local data on suicide prevention available in our community. If so, where? And this person indicated that they didn't know. So for this one, I would say this might be at a level 1. Deborah, is that what you got for this particular dimension?
Yeah, it was about a level 2, number 2. No knowledge about suicide.
Oh, okay. And why were you at a level 2? Because I scored it a 1.
I guess on the first question, he said, it says how knowledgeable are community members about the issue, and he said not sure. He said he doesn't know that the community is super knowledgeable about it. So I guess on that question, I thought, well, he's kind of saying maybe he's not sure, but the community, they're not knowledgeable about it either. So that was one of the things that why I put number 2, no knowledge about suicide. And then I looked at the second question, what types of information. He said he didn't know, and he didn't know if there was anything out there. And then the last one, he doesn't know about data. And so that's how I got to number 2. How did you come to number 1?
Well, I guess I just kind of looked at, he just didn't know about anything about the community. And so I guess in my mind, I just thought that, well, maybe it's just an issue that he thinks that they don't even really know about. But I can kind of see your reasoning, though, to where he's just not sure what's out there in the community or what would be available. But at least he knows where he could maybe go, he or she could go for information like Googling it, and he just wasn't sure if there was any information out in the community. So I guess kind of looking at these, one is just it's not viewed as an issue, but I guess that's not really clear in this. So I could see where maybe giving it a score of 2 might be a little bit better, to just that there's no knowledge about it. He can't fairly say that it's not viewed as an issue. So I think I'd be comfortable probably moving mine up to a 2.
Well, I think after listening to your why you did it as a 1, I'd have to say too that he isn't knowledgeable about what's in the community, and not everybody has computer access. He's going to Google it, but what about the other community members? If they don't have access to finding this stuff out, or maybe they don't know where this is, if there is anything out there. So I guess I'd be comfortable coming down on mine, maybe about a 1.75.
Okay. Because now hearing you talk about that, I never thought about maybe the access to technology in the community, or if a lot of people know how to use Google or the internet to kind of do their own research. I mean, maybe they're just so used to, going and talking to somebody or something like that. So what I'm wondering about on this one, though, is we're asking him about what he thinks about the community, but it's clear here to me that he doesn't know. So are we just going to kind of think that maybe the rest of the community doesn't know about it like him, or just that he just doesn't know?
Well, I guess what I have to think about too is that, we were really careful in choosing the people that we're going to interview. We looked at the demographics of the community. We looked at, the organizations, law enforcement, and so, seeing where this person fits in the community. And I'm just, for the sake of this, I'm just going to assume he's not with any organization, but he's with one of the specific demographic types. So that's why I would, come down on mine a little bit too. So probably.
Okay. I think a 1.75 then. That sounds good to me. How about you?
Yeah, that sounds good. I think that would be our score for this dimension.
Great. So looking at our pod results here, looks like a lot of you have also indicated you would score this in the 1 to 1.75 range as well. And this, again, is going to be what you're going to do to reach the consensus score for each dimension, for each interview. And what that's going to look like ultimately when you're done is you're going to have a discussion for each one. Maybe not so much for the ones that you were spot on, because the tools really kind of help you through this to justify the score that you give it, and it gives you what you need to be able to discuss this with someone, the other scorer, if you weren't able to have the same score when you did come together to have these discussions. And so what your combined score is going to look like then is like what's in this table here, and it's interviews 1 through 8 and dimensions A through F. And you'll notice the difference in this column is there's a total, and I'm actually going to turn it over to Deborah now to discuss how to actually find your score.
So, this one here is to find a calculated score. So as you and your partner score there, the two of you get together and you discuss each of the interviews, number 1, number 2, number 3, across the top there. So for dimension A, you'll score that question. Dimension 2, you'll go across. And so you'll just keep adding that score across like that first for dimension A until you get to the total on the right side. And so the total you can see for dimension A is 22.25. So you would continue going across each of the dimensions and just adding those all up and getting your total for each one of those dimensions. And so, these discussions are really really interesting as they take place because it really gives you a chance to kind of think, talk out your reasoning behind these scores and why you scored them. And kind of gives you this is where more and more of your community, that you get to know more of the community and how they're viewing suicide prevention. So I guess that's the most important thing here is that as you're scoring these questions, you're not scoring yourself or what you think or how you feel or anything. Because remember, during those interviews, one of the things we said that was really important was to write down your comments, and your how the interview feels to you. You're writing comments, and so this is where all of those comments really help you out to come down to that one score when you're both sitting there talking about them. And so on this slide here, it's we're looking at the calculated score, and as I said earlier in this webinar, this is where the math really starts coming into play here, and after you score all of your dimensions, you're going to have your total. So each of your dimensions, as you can see on this slide, has a total. So the 8, divided by 8, you did 8 interviews. And so you're going to divide each dimension score by 8. So, for example, 22.25 divided by 8 equals 2.78. So that's what you're going to do for each one of your dimensions to find your dimension scores. And so this is where it's really going to be important that you have that 2.78 or 3.44 when you move further along into developing strategies. But right now, you just want to make sure that you're getting the division in there to, get the scores correct. And then you're going to go on to figure out your overall score. And so in the last score, you took all of those dimension totals and you divided them by 8, and you got your total. Dimension A, 2.78, dimension B, 3.44, and then so on down. So you have 6 dimension scores there. When you add those all up, you're going to get 20.16. So that's going to be your total. And so you're going to take that total, and then you're going to divide this total by 6. Where the 6 comes from is that there's 6 dimensions. So so each one of those dimensions is represented in this 6. So you're going to divide 20.16 by 6, and this is where you're going to get your overall community readiness assessment score. In this example, it's 3.36. So this is what it's going to look like on your scoring sheet. These are your combined scores. And so you can see after both people talked over each one of the interviews in each one of the dimensions, you're going to see in this sample here that there's different scores in each one of the totals, for the interviews. And so on this example, you have everything from dimension C, interview 1, this one was scored a 6 point, all the way to existing efforts, number 6, it's a 2 point. So you're going to have scores that are really different all throughout your scoring, and that's the way it should be. And so you can see on this sample here, you've got your total over there on the right side. And one of the things that we're doing is that we're creating a Excel spreadsheet so that this will all be totaled for you, that you'll put all of your numbers in from 1 to 8, and it will be scored. It will be added up automatically for you, so you'll get that total number. And then you can see that the total, right next to the total on the right side, it says divided by 8. Again, this sheet will divide your numbers for you, so you'll have your number 2.78. And one of the reasons that we did this is because you're working with a lot of numbers here, and you have a lot of like 2.50, 4.25. When I was first doing this, I must have come up with a different score every time I added these up, and my dimension scores would never come out right. I did this with a calculator. I did it by hand. And so finally I just put it all in an Excel spreadsheet and just did it automatically, figured out the formula and did it. And then I came up with my combined score and my overall stage of readiness. So when you're looking at your overall state, your overall score, the result, what the score is your overall score of readiness for your community. So what we're going to do with these scores next is we're going to round those down. And this is going to this will really make a lot more. We're going to use both of those scores, but for the purpose here, we're going to round it down to 3 points. So we've got 3.6. We round that down to 3 point. That's the third stage of vague awareness. And so each of your each of those dimension scores, you're going to round those down, or each of your overall scores, you're going to round those down. And so that's how you're going to get to that overall score. Oops. So, your next steps, what you're going to do is you're going to identify 2 people to score. And when I did that last week, when we did the interview process, we talked about, the issues of confidentiality and bias. And again, because we said you're going to have two people that are going to do your interviews and two different people to do the scoring. Again, as a scorer, if you're related to somebody, this is a family member, a really good friend, someone you know really well, this could create an issue of bias and confidentiality in the long run. So we really recommend that the two people that do score are not the same ones that do the interviews, and that they are not closely related or anything to the people that did the interviews. And then once you go through all of your scoring process, we're going to ask you to submit, your information to your technical assistance coordinator. And, again, throughout this process, keep in touch with your coordinator, and they can help you throughout this whole process. And then after that, we want to schedule a call with you to discuss the overall score, to go over the interviews with you, and the scoring process. And because, we want you to know this process really well, because you are going to be using this again. If you started with one community, some of you are going to do this in second, third, fourth communities. Some of them, you can also use this as a post score. Maybe you want to measure how well you're doing in a 9-month period, and you do the exact same questionnaire 9 months from now. You'll be able to see if your scores go up in some of the dimensions or if they go down, and then you'll be able to adjust your plan, to what those scores are. So it's really helpful, to really take the time to get to know this whole process. And again, we've put some really important web links up here. And if you haven't gotten on these sites yet, I'd really encourage you to do that. The SAMHSA Tribal PTA Center, their website is listed here. Go on that center website, and you'll be able to see a lot of information on there. And you'll also get some information more about what the Tribal Training and Technical Assistance Center is all about. We've also put the SPRC, Suicide Prevention Resource Center, up there. And again, they have really good trainings on there. They have the ones that are that talk about the community readiness assessment. But again, there's also a lot of good resource information concerning all different aspects of suicide prevention, postvention, training. So take some time to get on that website and really check it out. And the last one we have down there, Colorado State. When I was learning the community readiness assessment, it really helped me to go into their bibliography and to really look at some of the reports that are there. How did they come up with this whole model? Who did they, do this? Who were their test, subjects? How did they come up? How did they come up with? I didn't read each one of those in depth, but I did, figure out at least, how this all came to be, and it, answered some questions that I had about the whole thing. So again, our next webinar is going to be on February 3rd, and this one here is going to be developing strategies. How do you use all this information to develop your strategies? What are those strategies? How do you pick those out? What does that score mean, in relation to a strategy? So this is going to be a really important webinar, and I'd really encourage all of you to come back for this one. And again, this is all going to be tied together for you. And so in this next week, as you're going through your interviews and some of you are going through your scoring process, give us a call so that we can help you with that. And so at this time, we went over a lot of information today. So if you have any questions on this, comments or anything, this is your time to give us some feedback and ask us some questions on what we covered today.
And if you would like, you can use the chat box, which is to the right-hand side of your screen. Or if you would prefer, you can press *6 to unmute your line. we'll give everyone a couple minutes to do that. In the meantime, during the scoring section of the presentation, Roberta brought up a really important observation, which is that it seems to her that the 1 and 2 of the scoring of the dimensions should be reversed, that because 2 is labeled as no knowledge and 1 is thinking it isn't an issue. Deborah or Iceland, would either one of you want to respond to that observation?
Well, I think this is where the when you're doing that scoring, it's really important to have that anchored rating scale in there, and you are going to go back and forth between these scores, and that's why we have it as 2.25, 2.50, 2.75. This is going to be a judgment call on your part, when you're going to do that, when you're coming up with that individual score. And then when you go on and do your combined scores with your scoring partner, that conversation that you have on each of these questions in relation to that specific dimension really does help, make it more clear on what your overall score is going to be for that dimension.
Deborah, this is Iris. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I think that's a really good point, and one of the things that will help the interviewers is to always go back up to the title of the dimension. If you start to hear yourself asking questions about an individual person's knowledge, the dimension will remind you that you're trying to understand the community's knowledge about the issue. So as I was listening to your wonderful conversation between you and Iceland, I could see where you could start to try to determine his knowledge. But if you just remember, as you read the questions and on the anchored rating scale, that you're trying to understand the importance of the knowledge of the community, and that individual represents that community. And I had this come up several times for me, and what I would always listen for is someone to say, well, in my community, we don't view suicide as an issue at all. And I don't think that there isn't anything that we need to know about it. Right there, when you hear something like that, you're at a 1. And he kept guiding you to, I don't know where to find it. I don't know where anything is. And so, again, when, like you're recommending, when you get into the conversation, just, if you have to just reinterpret those elements to remind yourself, am I looking at this person's knowledge? And is he truly saying for it to be a 1, is he really saying that we don't view this at all as an issue and there isn't anything that we need to know? Or is he telling you, I don't know anything about this and I don't even know where to go to find the information? So the titles to the dimension are there to help you as you're listening and taking the notes of your interviews. And this dimension in particular is so very important in terms of trying to come to an understanding of what the community knows about suicide. And if it applied to any other issue, then you'd be asking that same question. But I think those are really, really good points, and I really appreciate them. Again, it gives us an opportunity to really help people to explain it, but it's going to be up to the interviewer to make those interpretations and those judgment calls. But because you have 2 people rating it and they're coming to a consensus, that's where you get the rich conversation. And in all of the CRAs that we've conducted, this is really the key point in planning, that if you remember those conversations that you're having, those will come forward as you begin to decide what strategy do we select for this dimension. if this is where your lowest score is. I can't remember on the sample that you just gave what the score was for this dimension. But just, I just want to say thank you for allowing us to really break this down and help people to understand it. This is so important, and thank you, Roberta and Claudette, for your comments on this. I can't thank you enough for that.
And next we have Lucy Briggs from Yakima Nation. Should we have all 8 interviews scored before the next webinar?
Yes, we hope that all of you will have your interviews scored, because this is a process that you're going through, and so when you get into when you get to the next the next webinar, the number 6, where we're going to be bringing all the strategies together, you can have your scores in front of you, and as the presenter goes through the whole that whole topic, you'll really have some ideas. You'll get some really good ideas, some insight, and you want to be making notes about those. And you could even start really seeing how this is all going to come together, in the direction that you're going with your communities.
And our next question: do we send our results to our TA coordinator?
Yes, that's correct. We want to be able to review those with you, to go over all of those, and to make sure that, the whole process is, is right on in what you've done. And like I said before, you are going to be doing the CRA again, probably more than once. And so as you go through this process, you're just going to get, so that this. But then we also need to see what the scores are also. Iris, do you have anything to say on this one?
I'm sorry, can you just repeat the question again? What do we do with our scores when we're done?
Yes, sending them to our TA coordinators.
Yes, submit all of your final scores, your scoring sheets to your TA coordinator, and after the next webinar, the work will really begin to help you to begin to step forward into your planning. And so the CRA scores for each dimension, you will get the best out of next week's webinar, having those completed and in hand. It'll be so helpful to you. And then once your TA coordinator receives those scores, that will allow them to start knowing where to guide you and help you to develop your plan to address the lowest scores first.
Are there any more questions in regards to the scoring process? We'll take another minute or so. If you have any remaining questions, you can unmute your phone by pressing *6, or you can enter your question using the chat box, which is at the right-hand side of your screen. Okay, and if we don't have any further questions, this will be concluding our webinar for today. And as always, we like to just give our final slide of all of the contact details for your coordinators, your Native Connections coordinators. And there you'll see their immediate contact information, email, and phone number. Thank you again for joining us on today's webinar, and we look forward to having all of you back on February 3rd. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.